Does it feel like every part of your life is divided? Every scenario, every environment, your church, your school, your work, your friends, left, right, conservative, liberal, religious, secular. It seems you always have to take a side. This is a conversation between a progressive Christian and a conservative atheist who happen to be great friends. Welcome to Living on Common Ground.
Do you think if we met today, we would still be friends?
I don't know, but we're friends now.
A mob is no less a mob because they're with you.
Man, so what? We won a few games. And y'all fools think that's something? Man, that ain't nothing, y'all. And you know what else? We ain't nothing either. Yeah, we came together in camp. Cool. But then we're right back here and the world tells us that they don't want us to be together. We fall apart like we ain't a damn bit of nothing, man.
All right. I didn't give you a lot of notice on this one, but it's your topic, so I don't feel like you need notice.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Well, let me read. I think I need that green folder because I want to make sure that I'm not saying something that you didn't actually say.
Who cares?
All right. So, I do want to talk about that, but I didn't have part of. Okay, so you've talked in here about incentive and homelessness and stuff, but I didn't feel like talking about that today. What I did want to talk about was your bullet point here that says churches who promote anything political should not have tax-exempt status. Okay. So my initial reaction is, sure, I agree. And then that's the shortest podcast we've ever done.
All right.
However,
see you next week.
However, I want to know, because I like to really overthink things and analyze things. I want to know what exactly you mean by that. And because again, at first blush, I completely agree that that churches as institutions should not be involved in politics. But I want to know what you mean by promote anything political, because there could be a difference. So go. What made you write that? First of all, why did you even put that on the list?
Well, I put it on the list because I was trying to come up with any kind of like controversial topic that I could think of.
Yeah, and so okay, so the next question would be, but I cut you off, but why did you think that one would be controversial?
Well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm not so sure that I think churches should have tax-exempt status anyway.
Okay.
Right from the beginning.
Okay.
So we could start there.
Yeah, we don't have complete tax-exempt status, by the way.
I mean,
I think that's a misconception. I think a lot of people think, like, for example, Grace United Methodist Church sits right here on about 22 acres in the middle of Mount Juliet. Mm-hmm. And some people think that's, they're not paying taxes. Well, we do pay property taxes.
Property taxes, sure.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I bring that up is because I've had, like, a relative.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. He's never going to listen to this, but just in case someone else does that maybe knows him, I won't name him. But he was lamenting the fact that in the town that he lives in, all of these churches are popping up.
Mm-hmm.
And his thing was, we're not going to be getting any tax money from them. They're going to ruin our economy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds right.
That's not right.
Ruin our economy.
Ruin our economy.
No, I mean, I don't want to go down the. I don't want to get too.
Well, you brought up taxes.
No,
I
know.
Of it.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, like, I could go down the economic side.
And you'd probably, and I would, and you would lose me quickly. Because whenever we start talking about money, I glaze over.
Well, I mean, I think there's something interesting in that when it comes to human nature. It's the reason that I love macroeconomics, because I think macroeconomics is really actually the study of human nature. That's what it is. It's not really the study of numbers. That's a misnomer. So, for instance, if you did take, I mean, Never mind.
You said so many things there that I don't understand.
Well, incentives drive behavior. Disincentives drive behavior, right?
Sure.
So that's what macroeconomics is, just the study of incentives and disincentives and human behavior, and the distribution of scarce resources with limited use. That's like the definition of macroeconomics. It's when you have finite resources that have to be that have multiple uses. A resource can be used in lots of different ways.
Sure.
And it's finite. So how is that done? That's all macroeconomics is. And so then all of the systems and the fixes to the systems and then the fixes to the fixes of the systems and all of those kinds of things, those are all incentives and disincentives that drive behaviors into different ways. It all has to do with human behavior. And so that's why I think it's interesting. So we could go down that route, but I don't think that's what you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, because you would be the only one talking.
When I say anything political, I meant I was trying to get as expansive as possible, because I do think that most of the time when we use the term politics, what people think is they think, the kind of sports that we see on TV of laws, Congress members, political parties, these types of things. And I think that government and policy and laws and the legal system and all of that is all downstream of culture. And it is kind of a feedback loop. We could get into that if you wanted to, but my point in saying it as expansively as I did, and maybe I would, and we could talk about this a little bit, limit it a little bit. Maybe I would concede a little bit on that statement. But I start there because I think that it's far too easy to say, because I think the vast majority of people would be okay with saying we don't want a pastor standing up behind the pulpit and saying you should vote for Al Gore because he's going to save our environment. You should vote for George W. Bush because he's going to protect us from the terrorists, right? I think most people, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think most people would be okay with saying like, that's inappropriate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But but let's be honest, that happens.
It happens all the time.
Right.
And by the way, and the reason I say like so we have our family has, by and large, except for about 3 years before we left California, by and large, the churches that we attended would most of the time probably be considered more progressive churches as adults. And so I have seen the political statements coming from the left in churches.
Sure.
I want to be really clear, actually, and this is not just because you're my friend. I think you actually do a really good job of trying to not do that. I very often on Sunday morning from about 9:30 to 10:15 feel very comfortable that the message is going to be as non-political as possible and as, hey, look into your own heart as possible. But I know that that's not, but that is not the path of least resistance for an individual who's speaking to a congregation, for an individual who's speaking to an audience. It's not the path of least resistance for me if I'm speaking in front of an audience. And so I would like for churches, I think it's most appropriate for churches to start from the position of we're not getting involved in culture wars, in politics at all. Start from there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I guess we can kind of concede a little bit because I can hear all the voices in my head. There's a lot of voices in my head. I can hear all the voices because I have studied all of this. I understand theory. I know the people who would say, all education is political. All history is political. All religion is political. You can't not be political, right? That is a point of view, and there are legitimate arguments.
You're sounding a little Marxist with that.
It comes from theory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's Marxism. But they have a point, and under a particular framework of seeing the world, I understand their point. I resist it because I want to.
Sure.
I don't want that. And I just don't. I think that the appropriate place. Okay, so going back to what Peter Rollins was talking about when he said a community is defined by their enemy, right? Which I think he's absolutely right about. I think that is the starting place. Then you have to recognize that truism, right? You go, we're a community because we're like this and not like them. And what I would like is for the position of any organization, any church, not any organization, obviously, but any church, recognize that, yes, people who are here tend to have an affinity toward each other, and we're not like them. And so, so when we're in here in this little group talking, let's talk about how we relate to them instead of how they're the enemy. Recognizing that we're going to start with this kind of human primal, there's the enemy out there. Okay, now starting from there, how do we change our hearts to deal with,
Yeah.
And maybe that's too much.
No, okay. So there's a lot, right? And of course, some of the language, and I know you're using the language, and maybe it's the language you want to use, but you reference Peter Rollins. I do. My feathers ruffle when I hear enemy language, especially with regards to community. I have no problem though acknowledging that communities are often based on who we're not like. We're like, there's an affinity that draws us together, and then part of that then as a community is identifying who we're not like. All right, and so the language would be enemy.
But I'm thinking of it from an amoral standpoint. I'm not thinking of it like it should or shouldn't. Right.
Just no, I get it.
Here's where we find ourselves.
I get it, and history speaks volumes about just that anyway. So one of the things I think that we have common ground on right off the bat with regards to that is that's kind of my whole shtick is, okay, acknowledge, look for the ways that you're different. But that's not what you should dwell on. You should be looking for the ways you're the same. Where are you similar? And because to me, that's what then expands the community, right? If the community is drawn together by affinity, then the more common ground, the more commonalities you can find with other people, the larger your community can be. Which is why I think ultimately, getting back to what Peter Rollins again, that's why I think ultimately the best form of community, which I think he would call communion, is actually wrapped around lack, because lack is the one thing that we all have in common if we're willing to admit it.
Well, and I think that we can see that when we think about how we talk about, you hear people talk about other groups of people, and they'll say, everyone just wants their kids to thrive. Everyone just wants to feel safe. What are they talking? They're talking about this feeling, this sense that we all have this threat of not having something. In the end, as he talks about, not having life, we're going to die. And so we all have this universal, that's the universal experience, is the understanding that we're going to die. And I think you're
memento mori.
That's
yeah. No,
that's right.
I'm a Christian Stoic.
I like it.
And I think, to be honest with you, though, little shameless plug, I'm working on a project right now where I believe that all Christians are Stoics, or at least have inherited that. Okay. It could be also, too, now that I'm thinking about it out loud, that Stoicism is just so influential in Western culture that you can't separate the two.
Yeah, I mean,
it's possible, too.
Okay. You've got the empire, the guy at the top of the empire who's considered maybe the greatest emperor of Rome is also the
Stoic
greatest
philosopher.
Stoic philosopher.
I don't know if he's the greatest.
Well,
Epictetus, in my opinion, or Seneca, you could make an argument. Definitely, he's one of the top 3 as far as famous.
Yeah, but you're going to see meditations sitting on people's.
Oh, it's the number one
stands.
seller.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I have your copy in my car because I'm just going to buy my own. I'm actually going to buy that. I'm going to buy the Letters of Seneca, and I forget the name of the book by Epictetus. Well, it's anyway. But that I derailed
completely.
I completely
off.
derailed.
I'll say also back to the topic.
Yeah.
I know you get flack, I think, for not being political enough.
Yeah, I was going to go there. Okay.
Which I appreciate. I personally appreciate. And again, this isn't me kissing up.
Because here's the thing, right? So when we talk about politics, and the reason I asked you about the way you worded it is this. So as I was thinking about it, one of the things I thought about, one of the things I've heard in the past is, well, we're not talking about partisan politics. You need to keep partisan politics.
Right.
Right. And so when we start talking about separation of church and state, or, that the church should not be promoting any politics, what often people are talking about, and I think you mentioned this, or you alluded to it anyway, is partisan politics.
Right.
Right. And so a church should not promote any particular candidate.
Right.
Or get behind any particular party. That being said, we're seeing that become more and more prevalent in our country all the time. And people who are thinking, oh, it's a relatively new phenomenon, and they're going to look at the Trump administration or the new term that we use a lot, that just like most terms, we're going to completely beat into the ground, Christian nationalist. But it started long ago.
I would say that it's the natural state of being.
Well, I think that what we're seeing
not just
now,
for the right. I mean, it is.
Well, and that's so that's my point, right? So, in my opinion, my experience. Let me say this: my opinion is based on my experience. So, my experience is this: what we'll then say is, well, we're not talking about partisan politics. Yes, everyone agrees the church should not be involved in partisan politics, and even that everyone agrees, I think, is probably
right.
I think that's not true.
Right. Yeah.
Because there are churches that are very much supporting political candidates.
Sure.
All right. I definitely won't do that. Where I do get the push, and you're talking about, is when we start sort of nuancing. We start saying, but there's the politics of the gospel. Interestingly enough, my friends, and I've said it, I've said it, and I do think about this as I'm preaching. Often, though, it's the progressive in me, or my progressive friends, that make that sort of that nuance. And because what they're in our minds, I'm not going to throw other people under the bus. I'm going to fully own this. Is that when I look at particular issues that have become politicized, they often do touch on the way I understand my faith.
Sure.
Right. And so then that becomes that becomes an issue. How do you talk about that, or do you talk about that? Because you should talk about that, right? So, like, for example, human rights right now it's a politically charged topic. Here's one of the things that helps me with that, though, is instead of thinking about things in terms of topics, specifically human sexuality and human rights and stuff like that, it's better for me to think about it in terms of people than it is about politics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how can I talk about something and make it personal rather than political grandstanding?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes, yeah.
So I may talk about things that are political hot buttons at the time, but I don't do it in such a way that I'm making it political.
How so?
Okay. You mentioned the idea of check within yourself. All right. So, okay, here's a great example, and it's from a while ago. I was talking about, we were preaching about, the sermon was about trying to treat everybody with dignity and respect.
Mm-hmm.
And I used Paul's discussion about there's no longer Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male and female, but we're all one in Christ. And I even did this whole little thing where I talked, like I had a diagram, and I thought it was very clever. I often, especially when I start thinking about, I think I'm pretty clever, until someone else points out.
One of the things you and I bond over. We both think we're
clever.
Pretty clever.
So anyway, so I had done it, and I thought, okay, I thought like I did a pretty good job of addressing things like racism,
mm-hmm.
or sexism, or all of the isms that we want to politicize.
Mm-hmm.
Because racism is still very much a politically charged issue.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I had someone come out of the sanctuary and screaming and yelling at me that I used Paul to defend homosexuality.
Mm-hmm.
So my attempt was to, yes, address if there are things in your own life that you need to be considering, or you're, I try to do it in such a way that I'm not saying this is how you should vote, this is what you should do, but making it in such a way that if you do struggle with racism, maybe that'll be something that hits home to you that day.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have to name it.
Yeah, I think that you're in it's a tough position to be in for you.
I was just gonna say, I try to allow your conscience to also speak to you in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe that's what I'm trying to do is just hit on something that might be enough to trigger your conscience,
mm-hmm.
without me coming out and calling you out on it. Or like this past week, right? Well, today the episode comes out about guns and violence and stuff because of what happened a couple weeks ago,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess just last week.
Yeah.
Gosh almighty. And so I completely changed my sermon
mm-hmm.
on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Were you in the children's room? Were you in there?
No, yeah, and I was with the kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, I completely changed my sermon, and
Yeah.
I did talk about gun violence.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about violence, but I talked about it from a perspective of how does that impact us emotionally? Do you feel impotent as you watch these things? Is you're in our thoughts and prayers? Is that enough? And maybe, but maybe not. And so I didn't use it as an opportunity to share my opinion about whether or not people should have guns or what kind of reform there needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
I simply tried to acknowledge the fact that no matter who you are, no matter how you vote, nobody's happy
mm-hmm.
that people are being shot in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So can we at least acknowledge that?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's hurting when they see these things on the news.
Mm-hmm.
And so, interestingly enough, at the end of the couple days, because some people watched it later and some people watched it again, but by midweek, I had heard from some of the most progressive people in our community and some of the most conservative, and I'm speaking politically now, not theologically, but in our community, that thanked me for being honest and vulnerable and talking about that.
Well, my wife said that she appreciated it.
So was it political?
I don't know. I didn't hear it.
Well, now you got to go back and watch it.
Yeah, I will. But what she had said was that she really appreciated the tone. And obviously, I don't speak for my wife, but I'll say, like, when it comes to like the topic of gun rights, along with the topic of gun violence, she and I are pretty close. So, and so, her saying that she liked the tone and she thought that it was really appropriate tone and a good position. I mean, like, I'm just saying that to say, like, you know, it was validation that I probably would feel the same way. Anyway.
So, okay. So that's the question. If we're talking about a complete separation of church and politics, is it okay to talk about issues that are being politicized?
Okay, so this is the thing, and this is where I feel like you're in a tough spot, and also I think that the my expectation is different for you than for the community at large. And this is I don't get to set the rules. Do you know what I mean? Like, if the community wants to be a thing, I don't get to say no.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that is a position that I always take.
Okay.
If I'm in a group and the group is like, we are this, and I go, but I don't want it to be like that. So I don't have some sort of overriding right.
You don't,
do you know
like,
what I mean?
Just give the finger, deuces, I'm out.
Well, maybe no. I'm just saying, like, that it's not up to me. If the group wants to be a thing, it has the right to be the thing.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so if a group wants to be on a particular side of the aisle, I don't get to say that they don't get to, right? I can make trouble, I guess, if I want to, or I can try to influence if I want to. But if that influence doesn't work and I want to make trouble, like, that's just going to make trouble. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not going to do that.
You're unique.
So,
You're unique in that.
I mean, I just think that it is the right of an organization to be what they want to be. So anyway, and I also recognize that it is very typically more difficult for followers of a leader to well, I don't want to go down that road. It's difficult. It's really difficult in a larger group to maintain that feeling of, like, we're going to try not to be an us against them type mentality. It's just very, very hard because all of the personalities are bouncing off of each other. And so I don't know that it's reasonable for me to expect in a large group, any kind of large group setting, that it not move toward that. Does that make sense? So anyway, I think you're in a tough position because when you're up in front of the congregation, there is an expectation that you're giving an admonishment. You're giving a lesson. You're giving a direction. You're not just up there leading a group therapy session. You know, you're giving instruction. So what is the instruction that you're giving? You know, and so that's a tough position to be in. To your question specifically, should we talk about these topics if they happen to be maybe in the current zeitgeist.
Mm-hmm.
I would prefer, that we talk about them and that we try to be cognizant of the signals that we give while we're talking about them that indicate to others, we know we're on the inside.
Sure. Like, I mean, a common one is, are they undocumented or are they illegal?
So that's one, but also what I would say is that let's recognize, I think we should recognize that if we're people of faith, and I say we because I'm here, right? I don't consider myself that, but I'm here, right? And you've said that I have to consider myself that. So
I'm saying
I'll acquiesce.
You don't have to believe in God to be a Christian. I stand by that 100%.
I know you do. I really appreciate.
In fact, I'm being honest. Some of the best Christians I know don't believe in God.
That's a different topic. But okay. So when it comes to immigrants, people will talk all the time about Jesus was an immigrant. They'll use the Good Samaritan story to talk about this is how we should be dealing with immigrants, right? Illegal immigrants, which means they're talking about public policy. We should be developing government policy. We should, for instance, abolish ICE or not do deportations or whatever. Why? Because my faith informs so that's political just as much as the other way, right? When we say things like thoughts and prayers and we kind of chuckle, we know who would say that. We're signaling, right? We're signaling. Now, I understand that. Again, I understand that organizations, groups have an identity and that identity is amorphous and it kind of like bounces off of each other and it creates this identity. But I guess the reason that I phrased it the way that I phrased it is that I want to start from the position of we're always going to try to reject this political thing and then move backwards from there. And I'll be honest, I really like the idea, or I like the tone that you typically take. And again, this whole episode is sounding like I'm just like brown nosing, and I don't like that.
I love it.
So I'm going to try.
This is the best episode ever.
I'm going to try to insult you.
I'm going to do everything. I'm going to do everything I can to make this the #1 downloaded episode we ever had.
Yeah. So, but I like that tone. I like the tone of, okay, here's the thing that I know you're all thinking about. Okay, so let me back up for a second. And this is my pet project. My pet project when it comes to Christianity. This has been developing over the last 3 years. And I think this might be my pet project going forward, is to proselytize the real meaning in my mind behind the parable of the Samaritan, the actual meaning of it, and who the neighbor is, because I think it gets missed. And I think it is the crux of the Christian message. And it is the reason that you get crucified if you actually follow Christ.
All right. So you've mentioned this one other time in a podcast and you briefly said it. Share it. Proselytize.
Okay. The real quick. And I could give an hour-long speech on this, I think. I would feel very comfortable doing that. The Samaritan parable comes as a response to Jesus saying, the 2 commandments, love the Lord your God with all your heart, blah, 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 and love your neighbor as yourself. And then there's the question, yes, but who's my neighbor? And that's where the Samaritan parable comes. And in my reading of it, okay, so I'll just say, in my reading of it, his entire point, you have to know a little bit of historical context, knowing that the Samaritans were one of the tribes. Okay, they're one of the Semitic tribes, but they are the problem as far as the Judeans are concerned. They know out of all the people out there, the Samaritans are the problem. They're the bad guys, right? Jesus sets up this parable with the guy in the ditch being beaten up. That is the obvious thing that you're supposed to do in that parable is take care of that guy. Mm-hmm. Anybody listening to that parable would know, well, obviously the righteous person takes care of the guy. Now, as Christians, even cultural Christians, somebody who's grown up in church, we know when he starts going down the list of the people who walk by and cross to the other side of the street, the Levite, the Pharisee, those are all already bad guys in our mind. Mm. They're already the legalistic problems. What we have to remember is that that's not what the Judeans that he was talking to would have thought. Mm-hmm. They would have known that they're the good guys. So if you're a progressive, right, that is the most, that is the, I'm trying to think of like, if you, maybe that's AOC in your mind. Mm. Maybe that's, a civil rights leader in your mind is the Levite, right? If you're a conservative, it is whoever the conservative person. The point is, you have to think of like, who is the righteous person? Not like the, in scare quotes, righteous, where we call them righteous and we know that what we really mean is they're pharisaical. Mm-hmm. And that the Samaritan is exactly whoever you know is the problem, right? So if you're progressive, it is the most conservative, Ben Shapiro, Rush Limbaugh, whatever. Yeah. And if you're conservative, it's the other side. It's the AOC, it's the Bernie Sanders, it's the whoever, right? And at the end of it, he goes, all right, who acted like the neighbor? And it was clear it was the Samaritan acted like the neighbor. And what he was saying is, love the Samaritan like yourself. He wasn't saying love the guy in the ditch. Mm-hmm. And again, when I give this,
because we already all know that that's what we're supposed to do.
You're supposed to do.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really interesting too, I completely buy into what you're saying, and because one of the things that's really interesting is at the end of that parable when he says, "So who is it?" They can't say the Samaritan; they say the guy. Like they still can't bring themselves to say the name.
Of course,
right? And
I tell you what happens if you do. You get crucified. Well, that's what happens.
Because all of a sudden you recognize them as like other than just sort of right? It's not just that guy. It's somebody.
Yeah.
So I think to sort of agree with you here, not sort of agree with you. I agree with you. The problem we have in general is that we always want to, whenever we read the Bible, we read it as if we're the good guy in the story.
Of course.
Always. Of course. Right? We're never, when in reality, especially with parables, you should always identify yourself with, a parable should cause you discomfort. If a parable ever makes you feel vindicated, you've probably read it wrong. Right? Yeah. And so I think you're absolutely right. I think we all want to say, well, of course we're the Samaritans. Look at us. But here's the question. And I think this actually goes back to how we can talk, because here's the thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm glad you're bringing it back, because I didn't mean to just I think
it connects. Every issue, if you're going to really want to sort of say, where does the rubber meet the road? Anything you're going to talk about is being politicized somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And so to say I'm not going to talk about
history is politics.
Right, to say I'm not going to talk about politics, that's impossible.
Yep.
Right?
Sure.
But can you talk about them without becoming political? And I think that's the trick, right? So, and you had mentioned,
when you say political, you mean like divisive.
I mean, instead of saying, so obviously this is the right way. Right? And aligning yourself with, and I'm getting into the partisan stuff again, but aligning yourself with, you should of course know that the Republicans are right. You should of course know that the Democrats are right. You should, right? Like this is the thing.
But you can be partisan without naming, without going
I
into
am a
parties.
partisan person, but when you're talking about it as a community, especially if your community is going to be made up of a diverse group of people and not become a political party.
Yeah.
Right. So we're not brought together by our politics within the church. And I'm not talking about grace in particular. I'm talking about the church.
Yeah.
We're not even the church really isn't even a national thing.
Mm-hmm.
It should be a global, international thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is why and getting into a different thing, I won't, to the best of my ability, I do not want, I shouldn't say will, it makes it sound like I got more power than I do. I don't ever want to see an American flag flying from a church. And it's not because I'm somehow not proud to and
because you don't feel like it's appropriate.
I don't feel like
context.
I don't feel like it's appropriate. Now at my house, yeah, I fly a flag,
right?
Basically from Memorial Day to Labor Day,
yeah,
right. But I don't think it belongs here.
Yeah,
and I think that's relevant to the conversation. So back to how the Samaritan thing connects, right? The trick is, I think, is to say, okay, we're going to talk about an issue that is politicized, that's being discussed right now in politics, and we're going to touch on it, right? And it's going to become part of the conversation, not so that I can tell you which way to vote, but so that you can at least begin to consider it from different perspectives, and find some compassion in that moment.
Yeah. Right.
And so, if as you're listening to the Samaritan story,
yeah,
if you believe that the Pharisees are the progressives, there's other people sitting in the room that believe that the Pharisees are the conservatives. How then can we help each other say, well, wait a second, what if that's me? Right? And I think that's what we actually should be trying to do.
And how can I love the person
regardless
that I know is the problem?
Yeah.
For me, and this is something that Krista has really helped me with, because she has advised me a couple of times, and I have taken her advice under advisement. That's redundant.
That's okay. I love using words to define words. The same word,
which has helped. And that is that when I'm in a group discussion, if I'm going to contribute at all, to try to contribute from, like, use the therapeutic I statements. Try to contribute from a position of, this is my experience, this is what I've been, and not do the thing where I go, my experience is that those people are, right? Not do that, but like try to direct my view inward, right? If I think that people should do X, then my next response should be, am I doing X? That should be my only response.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So like you talk about the, look at, Jesus was a migrant, an immigrant. Okay. So our government needs to, right? Or whatever, or you should be welcoming the sojourner. So our government needs to be doing this. Well, ask yourself, when's the last time that you had someone who maybe is in this country undocumented in your home for dinner?
Sure.
What kind of relationships are you building? And so maybe instead of worrying about what the government should be doing, one of the first things we could be doing is worrying about what we should be doing. Apply it, like what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So can I share a story? I think that this relates.
You can.
Okay.
I'll allow it.
I have a microphone. All right. So several years ago, and it was several years ago because I've been at Grace now for 11 years. And it was the church prior to this one.
Okay.
And I got on my desk. So what we did there, I've debated doing it here. I think it would be a lot of fun. Is in the bulletin, there was a little tear off. And it was, if there's anything you want Jeff to talk about in a sermon, if there's a passage of scripture that you've always struggled with or wondered what in the world that means, what's that about?
You should totally do that again. That would be great.
If there's a topic that you think we need to be talking about, you'd write it down, and then when the offering was taken up, you would just tear it out of the bulletin and drop it in. And then what I would do is I would compile all of
Put
these
your
things.
name and address on it so
No,
we can track
you could
down
do
and
it-
see if you had the
You
wrong
could do it
answer.
completely anonymous, right?
Yeah.
And then the ushers would take them out, and then they would leave them on my desk so that when I came into my office on Monday
Staple
morning,
it to your tithe check, and then
I
we'll
think so.
see if we actually...
And did you pay enough for us to actually
That's
talk
right.
about it?
That's right.
Yeah. By the way, everyone,
Buying ad
Lucas
space.
is on our finance committee, so that's why he's worried about that. Okay. So anyway, I came in one day, and there was just one that week, and it was sitting on my desk, and it said, "Why doesn't the church ever talk about controversial topics, such as?" And I just jotted down the list.
Yeah.
All right. Sex outside of marriage.
Yep.
Abortion. War. Homosexuality, and capital punishment. All right. So I would say
punishment is an interesting one to throw on there.
Yeah.
The other ones I recognize as things that get brought up a lot, but
right.
I don't hear the capital punishment one a lot these days.
So I looked at it, and 4 of the 5 to me were definitely political talking points.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think the sex outside of marriage. I mean, other than if a political figure is caught in some sort of scandal, both sides like to point it out, right?
Sure.
While they're both doing whatever the hell they want anyway.
Sure.
And that's just, to me, that's one of the most glaring areas of hypocrisy. Okay.
Don't have sex till you get married, kids.
Right. And so,
you're welcome.
That'd be great. We'll talk about that one podcast. So anyway, it sat on my desk for months because what I thought was someone was baiting me.
Sure.
Right. I was like, all right, somebody.
Yeah. It does kind of sound like that.
It felt like it. Right. And then finally I was like, you know what? It's a great question. Why don't we? And I thought to myself, we're having these conversations in coffee shops everywhere. Why don't we ever talk? Like, why do we seem to want to just do vanilla?
Well, it's interesting. You took it as a rhetorical question and not what are the reasons why we don't?
Yeah, I took it as, hey, maybe we should. We should, right? And so what I did is I put together a sermon series, and each week we talked about one of those topics. Now, here's how I did it. I started out by we put a bistro table in the front of the sanctuary.
Yeah,
we lit coffee scented candles. We had 2 bar stools. We actually had 3 bar stools, and we had a candle. And then we would take the candle, or we would take the light from the Christ candle, and before I'd start the sermon, we would light the candle on the table from the Christ candle.
Okay,
and then I would introduce a topic, and we would. I would sit down at the bistro table, and I would talk about it as if we were in a coffee shop together. That was kind of we were trying to make us like a whole feeling like that, right?
Yeah.
And I prefaced the whole sermon series by talking about the story I just shared with you. I said at the very beginning of the sermon series, right? And by the way, no one ever came up to me and said I'm the one that put that in the offering plate. They didn't do it. So I started out by saying, well, one, we're unapologetically
at the end of the movie.
Yeah,
it was you, and this is how we find out that you have DID.
It was never me,
and you're just baiting yourself,
right? I said we're unapologetically the United Methodist Church. So does the United Methodist Church say anything about any of these topics? And so we read through those, and then I said, okay, now, and I would read scripture, and I'd say, okay, so some people use these like just samples, like not exhaustively, but they'll use this to support war, or this to say no war, or this to support abortion, or this to no abortion, or this for capital punishment.
Yeah.
And so the whole point of the series was, it's actually not as black and white as we might want it to be, and that there are people within the Christian community on both sides of all of these topics. The other thing that I did too, which I thought was very clever, again, I'm circling back to how clever I am, was
like to remind everyone,
I interviewed people with a video camera weeks in advance that had actual real life stories of these experiences.
Yeah.
So like I actually interviewed a guy who had been on death row for murder. And he
had been or was
had
currently?
Had been. He got off. There was like this little moment in time in Tennessee where capital punishment was taken off the table.
Yeah.
And during that time, he was paroled.
There. Interesting.
Yeah. And then like it came back, but he was already paroled.
So he became eligible for parole during that time because he had like gotten downgraded or something. Because obviously he was on death row.
He was still on capital punishment, but yeah, like his sentence was commuted or whatever. And because he had been in prison for so long.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden he was released.
Yeah.
I
Interesting.
mean, he's still a felon. I mean, he's still
right, but on parole.
Couldn't get a job anywhere, so he ran a fruit stand.
Yeah.
But I interviewed him.
Can I just say, by the way,
Yeah.
that is a great example of one of the things that I love about Tennessee is that because there's such low regulation around things like business and that kind of stuff, that the end of your story, I know so many of those stories in California. He was a felon, so he couldn't get a job. And I thought the next sentence was, so he reoffended.
Oh, no.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But here, you don't have to get a job. Just go sell something.
Yeah.
I think that part is great.
He called it a farmer's market, but it was just him.
That is
like a stand.
I think that's awesome.
And local farmers gave him stuff to sell.
When you can't get a job because nobody's going to hire you, but I mean, I could get a lawnmower and go mow people's lawns. I could go,
That's like what he did. Yep. That's what he did.
Great. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I interviewed the people and then I showed their video as part of the sermon, as part of the sermon that day. And I also made sure that each one of them were in church that Sunday in person. Because the other thing I find is that
even the parolee guy?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Because what I find is that you can hold your very strong opinions about avatars.
Make them put them in front of the person.
But all of a sudden, if you're in here demanding that people get that people should be electrocuted, tell it to him.
Right.
He's right there. Explain to him why he should be dead.
Right. No, I know.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Explain to him why he's a baby killer because he was in Vietnam.
Well,
right?
And that's not a argument killer.
No.
It's not it shouldn't be the end of your argument.
But it should give compassion.
But you should be able to talk to the actual person. I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that you can be anti-abortion.
Yes.
And be totally compassionate to a woman who has had an abortion.
Right.
You're right. I mean, I think you can still keep that position, but it is, to your point, completely cowardly to not be able to sit in front of someone who's had an abortion and say, I disagree with that. I think you shouldn't be able to. And also, I love you and whatever.
Yeah, sure. So, so I'll wrap this up because we're getting close to the end of time. But at the end of the day, the whole point was that this world's a lot more gray than we think it is, and that people on both sides generally have pretty good. I mean, they feel like they've got really good reasons, for what they're doing,
right?
And that nobody, especially if we're talking about within a Christian community, right, where people ultimately, hopefully, are trying to figure out what it looks like to live like Jesus, that we need to understand that they're not villains, that we just disagree about certain things, and maybe we even and I ended with, here's the one thing that all of those have in common, right? Because sex outside of marriage, there's familiarity with. Abortion, I know several people, and even more now, that have had to actually not just talk about it politically, but deal with it within their lives, right? It's not just a political talking point.
Sure.
War, people that
Obviously.
actually fought in war, right? And it's not just a political talking point.
Yeah.
Homosexuality, again, family and friends. It's not just, it's a real issue. It's not even an issue, it's people, right? And the same thing, like capital punishment. How great was it that I actually got to meet someone that had been, how many people can say, I know someone that had been on death row?
Yeah.
Right. And so, in all of those situations, the one thing that they had in common was that there were people that were hurting.
Mm-hmm.
And so as Christians, and I ended it this way. I said, so as Christians, really the question is this: can we overcome our opinions to show love and compassion and grace? And I think that question really shapes the way I will deal with any politics. Because at the end of the day, no matter how strongly you feel about any political opinion, about any political topics, it's your opinion.
It's just like your opinion, man.
It is. And can you get over that enough to be compassionate? And what I see in this world today is the answer for most people is no.
Yeah, that's the universal answer throughout all time.
I cannot.
Of course.
Right? But I think that the call within the community that I identify with is the answer actually should be yes.
Just know what you're getting into when you do that.
I know.
You're getting into a pathway to crucifixion.
I know this. I know that. But at the end of the day, I can fall back on my faith, but I can also fall back on some things that Epictetus taught about who am I actually trying to please? Right? At the end of the day, was it Marcus Aurelius, Seneca? I'll just keep naming a bunch of Stoic philosophers until I get it right. That said, why, and I'm paraphrasing here, and you know Stoicism, so I'm asking you, why do we spend so much time worrying about what everybody else thinks when we love ourselves the most?
Mm-hmm. Or put another way,
mm-hmm.
Why fear those who can destroy the body but cannot touch the soul?
That sounds very stoic.
Does it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, who said that?
I think that was Paul. It is scriptural. I'm nearly positive it's one of Paul's letters. I think it's Paul's letters.
Well, and here's the thing too. Even if it's not, even if he was like, oh, it was Jesus that said that, just keep in mind that the Gospels themselves were written after Paul's letters.
Right.
And after the destruction of Jerusalem.
Right.
Okay. All right. Do you want to end this thing? Did we find common ground?
I think that I would say our common ground is that while it's impossible to not talk about topics that would be considered political, because all language is political in some way, that we will endeavor to talk about it in a way that does not divide or villainize people, and instead tries to point the finger back at me, internally to myself. What's my responsibility? How can I be better?
Well said. Thanks.
See you next week.
Thank you for listening to Living on Common Ground. Please follow wherever you listen to your podcasts and share it with your friends. You can also find a link to our social in the description. The more people we have living on common ground, the better the world will be.